Hi, and welcome to Visibility Unlimited Spotlight, the video version of Visibility Unlimited podcast. So, whether you are watching or listening, I have a very special guest with me today, which I'm looking really forward to this conversation. Darryl Coulon, welcome.
Thank you, Leslie. Hi.
So, for everyone to know, Darryl and I met through our activism for the U.S. Israel relationship, which means so much and so in so many different ways for so many people. But we connected on so many different levels. But our conversation today, as we are closing out Black History Month, yet Black History is 365 days a year, the
Yeah.
conversation will be we are not monolithic. So, Darryl, if you don't mind sharing with the guests, what makes you not monolithic?
Well, Leslie, thanks so much for that question. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. Hello, everyone listening in and watching. Leslie, I know you know this, but I grew up in New Orleans, and for people who don't know New Orleans right now, it's carnival season. It's a city where anything goes. It's a majority Black city and has been for most of its history. It's a city that particularly my dad's side, has roots in just making the city, the Black culture, the Mardi Gras culture, all of these things that New Orleans is celebrated about and people know about, that is just kind of entwined into who I am.
Yes.
My dad's family, they're mostly Creole. So for those of you watching the video, you see I'm fairly light skinned. And so we're like a light skinned Creole Black people. And, so we are actually very lucky that we can trace our ancestry, at least in America, back to the slave ship that came to Louisiana on my dad's
Mm.
side. So that's not common for a lot of Black people for a host of reasons. And so,
Yeah.
knowing a little bit more about where we came from and where our Black story in America started, on my dad's side, is that I think that's pretty incredible. And on my mom's side, they're non-Creole Black people. My my
Can you can you share a bit more about Creole for those that may have heard about it but don't
Yeah.
really know?
So I'm not an expert on this, and
That's
so if
okay.
you want to correct me or whatever, like, yeah. So
Normal.
Creole, as I like to define it and explain it, is a really unique mix of African, both free people of color, free Black people, and enslaved Black people, American, Indian, French, and Spanish. So all of the both colonial cultures and the cultures that were forcibly brought into America and into Louisiana, and cultures that were there before colonial entry, all make up a really unique mix of Creole, like Louisiana Creoles. And so there's Creole people who look white, there's Creole people like us who look and are Black. Just really, just one of the more interesting, I think, elements about Louisiana culture being so different than anything else.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I'm Black. I know I'm Black, but like specifically, my dad's side, Creole, Black Creole people. So yeah,
It's your culture. It's part of your
yeah,
culture.
that's why my last name is French. I heard that French pronunciation in the intro.
Oh no. I couldn't help myself because we are not all monolithic. So we must understand that our
Exactly.
culture blends from so many different other cultures to make us who we are, that we should be looked at for who we are and not the way that we appear to be,
Yeah, I agree.
you know?
I agree.
So continue to share some of the other things about yourself.
Yeah, so yeah, we just talked about all the Creole people. That's my dad's side. My mom's side, more traditional African American roots. My great grandparents actually have a pretty interesting story of how they met. My mom's grandparents, who I was blessed to meet and know before they passed away. Again, I know that's rare and a blessing. I wish I had asked more questions, but I was young. But just knowing
So
that,
do I.
right. So my great grandfather was the son of plantation owners,
Mhm.
and his wife, my great grandmother, was the daughter of former slaves who grew up on that plantation. And
Mm.
so, like, knowing even just them and that history of how they met, and also how their relationship was even illegal for most of it just really sort of guides me of that. No one can take away my claim to blackness, as different and unique as both the New Orleans Black story, my individual story, which I know we're going to get into, Leslie, but I know at the heart just who I am as a person, how I see the world, and I know how the world sees me. I'm a Black man in America, and I wouldn't change that for the world, but there are certain challenges, but a lot of opportunities that come with just having this wonderful skin. I have this melanin shirt on to just to celebrate that. It's
Absolutely. Listen, when a lot of stories in the news, and so I'm going to say in the news because we as African Americans have walked into this, have lived this.
Yeah.
When you're the only one in the room, the only one in the space, the perception of who you are, what you are, but then there's something additional that in different rooms that you may walk into. I know that I've walked into, but I'm walking into as a guest. You're not a guest. It is part of who you are.
uh-huh.
Share a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
So I think, Leslie, you're talking about Jewish spaces and Jewish rooms as one example of sort of being in the mix. And it's a really interesting line of, I do feel the claim in Jewish spaces as someone who is proudly Jewish. And then in other times, I do feel almost like a fish out of water amongst my own tribe. One thing I love about being Jewish, that word tribe, I believe that is the first, like, Jews are the first people that the word tribe was used to describe. And so when I think about such a small, a global community, it's a small community of Jews. And so how tight knit Jews have been just in 3,000 years of Jewish history, and how that just still lasts today.
Right.
I mean, that the resiliency, the steadfastness, the stubbornness, it really is a light in you can easily get bogged down in the negatives of just being Jewish, even in 2022, right? But just walking into different places around America as a Jew, in Jewish spaces, and you're like, oh, I get it. Like, it's comforting. Even, like, I'll say, as a Black person, I don't get that in a lot of spaces. You can't just walk anywhere in this country and just like, oh, I fit in Jewish spaces a lot. Again, I'm kind of generalizing, but in Jewish spaces, more often than not, I walk in, I recognize things, whether it's in Hebrew or just like the traditions and the songs and the culture and the food, all of those things. Like, I get it.
Right.
Still like a journey of learning, because I didn't really dive into my Jewish experience until college for a host of reasons. But that's another aspect of Judaism that I love, is you can ask questions, and there's no like test all the time. It's like, I don't know this, so I'm going to lean into what I don't know and ask you a question. And if you think anything less of me, then I'm going to react accordingly and not engage. But overwhelmingly, that's the experience. But then I guess on the flip side of the coin is being, whether people describe themselves as Jews of color, or I describe myself as a Black Jew, Jews of color, including African American or Black Jews, represent about 20% of Jewish America. And so when I go into non-Jewish space, we're like, oh, Jews could be a little brown and Black.
Right. We're not monolithic. That's the whole point of this today. I love you so much, and I love having these conversations with you. And I'm like, yes, this podcast and everything is about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and culture. And this, you are the epitome of this, because don't assume who I am,
right?
Because where I may show up either.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm as Southern as they come. I also I'm like culture-wise pretty Black. Like, I have had, I don't know why, but I've had Alabaster Box by CeCe Winans on repeat all day. That's what I felt when I woke up, so I clicked repeat on that. And again, as my Jewish journey really, I guess, sort of started in college, I first started at a Catholic HBCU that I have nothing but the utmost respect for, but even in a space that was created for Black people who didn't have opportunities, even in New Orleans, let alone around the country, the sort of qualifying boxed in questions that I got it was really the first time I'd experienced that with Black people. Again, New Orleans is a majority Black city. I had never really had any question as to whether or not I was Black enough.
Right.
And so I get to, a place with mostly Black people and I'm like, oh, this is dope. I like this. Like, we don't get this a lot. And then they're like, oh, are you actually Black? It's like, yeah. Wait, can I touch your hair? No, you cannot touch my hair. Which
So it becomes almost the reverse and this is part of it as well. When I say we're not monolithic, I'm saying it to all of us across the board.
yeah,
Black, white, yellow, purple, green. We cannot just put all of us because we may look alike, sound alike, or walk alike, or close enough alike to assume that we understand the journey for which someone is traveling.
Yeah. And and I understood that. Again, New Orleans is, again, majority Black city, but anything goes. You almost, whether it's just being polite and Southern or you're just like whatever, you just
Right.
don't really question how people express themselves. And also, like, that's just how I grew up. Like, just accept people for how they present themselves, act accordingly, move on. And so when I was in that space, my birthday's late, so I started college at 17. So I'm just kind of like fresh, like just not really knowing what the world is.
I'm here.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, college, cool.
HSBC here I come.
So, being in that space, it was very, very challenging to be challenged by Black people. I was like, this is weird. And then when they found out that I was Jewish, which again, just like you could see the hamster wheels turning of questions that they're like, wait, so what parent is Jewish? Why are you assuming both of my parents can't be Jewish? So are you mixed? I'm Black mixed with a little bit Blacker. I don't know what else to tell you. So and so yeah, it was a very uncomfortable experience, to say the least, but it did open my eyes to the idea that even in amongst ourselves as Black folk, we got to have better conversations, whether it's about colorism or religious diversity, acceptance of different sexual orientations of Black folk. It's so many things that we need to work on internally, while also, pushing non-Black communities to be, better advocates and allies for and with us. But yeah, that was like my first 2 years of college. And then I eventually transferred to a state school, and I sort of had a night and day experience. I could be openly Jewish.
Okay.
I was, I mean, yeah, I was
As opposed to
like, that was, you mentioned, like, we met in our pro-Israel activism, and that's sort of where the last 2 years of undergrad, that's where it really heightened and picked up. And I just, again, was asking more questions, getting more comfortable with myself and sort of the, I guess, renegade, quote unquote, ways of how I could be Black, Jewish, gay, in all of these different spaces, but they didn't make me any less of any of my identities. And yeah, it wasn't as weird as I guess people wanted it to be.
but I love how you say it's people wanted it to be, as opposed to who you knew you were and you are.
Yeah.
And I think until we have the conversation that we live not for others but for ourselves within our identity, and that you we would hope you should. I shouldn't. You never tell anybody what they should do, but you should take people for face value for who they are and how they present to you, as opposed to the image that you have set forth.
Right.
That they must be this because they look like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same that when you're hiring. Well, I can check all of these boxes because this one does that. But there's so much more to people that they have no idea what's going on.
I mean, it's, and I find in the activism work that, Leslie, I know you've been a part of, and that just is my it's my 9 to 5. It can be incredibly complex of, explaining the simple thing of that multiple truths can happen, and that I simply because I stated this fact or I shared this identity, is I haven't set up a binary for you to counter. I'm just sharing who I am.
Right.
And that element, it's incredibly complex. But then just reaffirming who you are as a person, your values, your background. My roommate, and when I lived in California, my roommate would always joke when I met people at work, typically like new donors, I would somehow put in that I was Southern, because I didn't want anyone questioning that, like, oh, like, where are you from? You're going to know I'm from Louisiana, and it comes with all of the good, bad, and ugly of being from the South,
Right.
because that's me. And so on one hand, the work is so complex, but on the other hand, it's just as simple as saying, hey, I'm Darryl, I'm from New Orleans. This is who I am. Take it or leave it.
Right.
And I guess that's just been a constant, both professionally and personally for me, in the ever continuing journey of self-love and self-acceptance, especially as me being a part of, I guess, 3 underrepresented or 3 minority groups, however you want to frame it,
Right.
Where you can easily get bogged down in the negatives. And like, if you think about Black history, you think about negative stuff. I'm thinking about the celebratory things. I'm thinking about just waking up, be Black. I had a fun meeting this morning with someone, and I referenced the song, the Alabaster Box song that I was listening to, and the person I met her. First time I ever met this person, and I said, as CeCe Whiting goes, you weren't there. And she finishes the song, and I'm like,
because we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know how we can connect.
Yeah.
Now, would we have thought we would have connected the way that we did? Who knows? If we're in the same circles and we have same visions and missions and values, you're going to meet people that look like you, don't look like you. The bottom line is that the values are there.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make a difference where you've come from or what you look like.
Yeah.
It's where we're all going.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have that conversation enough. It's like you said, okay, you can check those 3 categories, right? But why do you have to explain those 3 categories? And I love it. You said, wait, it is not up for debate, or what did you say? It's not up for?
I don't know how you disagree with someone's identity. And like, I'm telling, when I lived in LA, before, we had to wear face masks and everything because of COVID. I guess I thought maybe it was flattering, or just, I don't know, but I would be in stores and people would directly speak to me in Spanish. I didn't think it was offensive. And I'm comfortable speaking Spanish, but I'm Black. And like, I don't know if you assumed I am Latino or Hispanic, or like, again, nothing bad about other cultures, but that wasn't me. That wasn't my truth. And so, when people assume, and that was like such a benign example, right? But when people are like, oh, are you sure you're not?
Are you sure you're not?
I am. Yes, I'm sure I'm Black.
And it's funny because when I lived in Europe, and I've spoken about this before, I was called métis, and that's a mix. And so, like you, I would be like, I'm mixed with South Carolina and South Carolina. So somebody should call my parents and let them know. I know I did not hear anything. My great grandmother's Cherokee Indian, but that was a way for others to feel comfortable, because in their mind in Europe, I did not look what they felt a African American woman should look like. So therefore, they wanted to be comfortable.
And it's so, I don't know if the right word is belittling, or even like dehumanizing in a way that someone, again, nothing negative against other cultures, but when people assume that I'm biracial, or they assume that I converted, or all of these things to diminish claims to any of the identities that I don't like. I don't think that, like, I am. I don't think about these things.
I am. I like that. I am.
Yeah, and so I was in San Francisco one time, and I was just like in one of the tourist, shops on the wharf, and the one of the workers was like, "Sir, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I have to ask, like, you look so exotic," which I'm like, "Great, where is this going? Like, are you from North Africa?" And I was like, "No." "Oh, Central America," and I think he was from Central America, and I was like, "No, I'm from Louisiana. I'm so sorry to be boring and simple, but please stop trying to either water down my identity, whiten me up to fit, your comfortability with either what you know or who you are to,
Right.
figure out how to engage with me." Yeah, I don't know what to
Yeah.
tell you.
I mean, sometimes I will give a slight pass because I go, "Do you see me?" And you're trying to connect because you're somewhere and you're the only one as well.
Yeah.
And so you're looking for anyone that you can connect to. And because I lived out of this country for 13 and a half years, I kind of understand that mentality, right?
Mhm.
You get that first, like, and I said, it's the pass
Yeah.
of the first, what comes out of your mouth first, and then we go from there.
Mhm.
But there's the pass, and there's the assumption that you have to fit what I'm thinking that you fit, and I need you to fit what I need you to fit,
Mhm.
and this is how we're going to have to do this for us to engage, as opposed to, wow, you're amazingly interesting and smart, and I just want to get to know you better. I just need to engage. Uh,
It Leslie, that reminds me of, in 2020, sort of during the so-called racial reckoning protests, all these particularly non-Black people were like, "Oh, we really got to understand, like, Black African American culture 101, like have a Black people 101 chat."
mhm.
And so a lot of people, usually like acquaintances or just people I had met in passing, started like blowing up my iMessage saying, what books can I read? And I was like, "Baby, I don't know you. You don't know my favorite color. We have not, went get ice cream together, but you want me to help you unpack 400 plus years of generational trauma and a lived experience that I like both struggle and embrace every day. And we don't even have the basic, information icebreaker chats about one
Right.
another." So it's like, can we actually get to what matters and why, like, I love the color blue, before we like talk about how I am more or less direct descendants of people who were enslaved, brought to this country, and how that impacts me daily.
Right.
So like, let's, like, and it again, like back to my comment about the work that I do now and how both complex and simple it is. It's so simple and easy to just have a normal conversation as two human beings and like, "Hey, you don't look like the people I grew up with or where I live now. Let's talk. Like, let's just get to know one another," versus, "So I just want you to help me get to this level of, I think, comfortability or understanding, and then
Right.
bye." Like, you're
Right.
my
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
and you all, as Maya Angelou said, believe people the first time they show who they are. I know I'm like butchering that quote, but
Yeah.
if someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them.
Which
There we
I
go.
believe in. Yes.
And so I think like that's part of it. Give people grace because these conversations can be sensitive, and some people
Mhm.
have more emotional readiness than others. But yeah, it's not that hard.
Yeah. I'm a big one on grace, because we know what we know.
Yeah.
But there's a point where you have to begin to educate yourself,
Hmm.
outside of yourself, or, as I always say, expand beyond your current culture, you know, because you can't come and have the same conversation with everyone and expect it to do the same thing. Yes, we're in Black History Month, but as I say all the time, 365 days a year, we don't only have to speak about our history, there's history being made today that we need to also honor as we honor our past.
Yep.
Because otherwise, we stay here. There has to be a growth of, where are we going in our history? What do we want it to look like? How do we build it? And guess what? It doesn't look like maybe what some may want it to look like,
Yeah.
but it's not their history to write. It's our history to write.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, Black history. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of shirts that said "I am Black history in the making," and it's like this idea of, I know in a lot of cultures, both Jewish and African American culture, the importance of our ancestors is
Yes.
just rooted in everything we do. My Catholic dad has candles under his my grandparents, who are both deceased, under his pictures of parents.
Right.
Jews typically name newborns after deceased relatives. Like that's rooted in, both
It's
of my
our history. It's our culture.
our history, but then also it's our present. Like I'm
Yes.
a junior, I'm named after my dad. We have the same exact name. That my Coulon last name has not a big presence, but they're like, I go home and people know my last name. And so, but what I'm doing now and the lived truths that I'm in, and I know, Leslie, this, like the career path I'm currently in, and what I eventually want to transition into, both not very Black
Let's talk about that. Let's
but
talk about how that is starting to
history.
shift. And I can't wait for you to be part of that shift. Feel free to share what you would like to do next.
So Leslie knows this. Anyone who knows, you don't even have to know that much about me. You can just see my social media. I love aviation. I always have. I flew a plane before I had a permit to drive a car. I was 14, flying an airplane, which you can do. And anytime I'm walking down a hallway or just have like a daydreaming moment, I'm thinking about, my head is literally in the clouds. And so, it's something that I'm not going to share, like, I guess, two of my biggest regrets. But I didn't want a third one to happen, of keeping or still running away from this magnet that is aviation. Like, no matter where I am, there's always like an aviation angle in my head. When I moved to Texas, I can see planes going into the bigger Houston airport. So it's just like, I think everything happens for a reason. And I think just gradually over the now over 10 years since I took my first flight, everything has just been pulling me back to that wonderful world of aviation. But and now I'm finally enrolled myself in a flight school, so I'm fortunate enough that I can, like, finance that, and like my free time. Again, literally head is in the clouds, and it's an expensive industry. Like, I mean, like most things now are expensive. But aviation has always been more or less an exclusive white boys club. It has been. And so the people who, and still today, the people who are, you know, who would go into aviation, their dads, grandfathers, someone either served, or, it's so, it's
So
exclusive.
very
In 2020,
singer, yes.
the statistic was 94% of pilots and flight engineers identified as white.
Right.
So, going into now a world, a new world, where it's
another new world.
It's still overwhelmingly white, but also there's been a lot of effort to diversify the field, to make it more obtainable, to make it more real for people who look like us, who want to fly an airplane, because getting paid to fly an airplane, it's pretty cool. I've done it a few times. It's pretty cool. But you get into a cockpit, you get into a flight deck, and you probably, as a Black person, you're probably going to be with a white pilot, and again, in an industry that is overwhelmingly white. And so pushing back on the idea of what I can or can't do as a career professional, even, like, means a lot to me. Yeah, I'm very excited
I'm excited for you. So do you know the meaning of the Cavu Group, or Cavu?
I don't.
Kind of aviation. So it is an aviation term.
Really?
It means Visibility Unlimited. Hence,
Really?
so that's why I named the Cavu Group.
Lizzie, I didn't know that.
So my diversity, equity, and inclusion firm, for those that may be listening for the first time, that is the work that I do.
Mhm.
And I named the podcast and the video Visibility Unlimited. And I just took it from the meaning of Cavu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's amazing.
So we're attached in there somewhere on another level. See?
Always an aviation angle, and I firmly believe that in every facet of life. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
and I think, Leslie, often about, like, not to introduce a totally different topic, but I think often about, like, our sight seen and unseen diversities. And so when I was signing the paperwork at this school, I think someone made a slightly homophobic remark about a celebrity's sibling. And so, I'm sitting there like, maybe they probably wouldn't have made an anti-Black comment because they say, oh, maybe I'll
Right.
regardless how I feel, like, I think there's a Black person here, or at least a person of color, of some color here. Maybe I won't do that. But they didn't know that gay person was in there. And so I guess my sight unseen diversity, even, in that space, I could have said, hey man, I don't think that's, and I think that even goes into, like, the idea of unlimited visibility is, like, not that you have to walk on eggshells, but you really don't know what a person is bringing to the table, what they have in their backpack. And so,
you know me always, what's in your bag.
uh-huh. And
Like,
so,
I've been through that. Yes. So
yeah,
you don't know. You really
yeah,
don't know.
it's,
And
and
so
I,
you just,
and
yeah.
you hear comments and remarks that you probably wouldn't, that are true and unfiltered, because someone doesn't assume, or they don't see that, or they don't believe that. And it's like, ooh, we got some work to do. And so, like, even I think that's in not just aviation, but all careers, like, whatever don't share or don't bring to the table, I think just you need to be cognizant and aware that someone else next to you, close to you, probably has a similar, something that they just don't want to share, that you just don't know, and that it's for them to share. But it's also for you to not share problematic, uncomfortable comments about, different demographics and different groups of people. Because, why?
Why? I was gonna say, well, yeah, what, I'm always at, what's your why? I'm always asking, well, what's your why?
What
And
did
you
you
can't
gain?
answer your why. What's your purpose of your why? Like, what is the added value to that? And
Right.
so, as we begin to wrap up, I mean, that's a perfect note to end on. I just want to give you just any last thoughts that you would like to share um, about just being aware that we're not monolithic. And
Yeah. Whether the black history, Black excellence, Black identity, and I'm using the word Black to just encompass the global Black experience. There are so many ways that, whether it's through food, music, culture, religion, that you may not readily identify, and you may, like, is that Black? Yeah, it's different and it's new. And I would encourage you, just as I have with my Jewish experience of the American Jewish community is mostly white passing. People have lighter skin than I do. Just as I have been leaning into what I don't know, and even sometimes where I don't fit in as easily. Like, I probably wouldn't play gospel music at a Jewish event, but hell, I'm gonna do it in this apartment. My grandma was a choir director at a Baptist church. Like,
I love it.
singing. And so, lean into the differences of how people express themselves, who are black folk, and really, obviously, anybody else, but particularly for African Americans, for Black people in this country, there are just so many ways to express the beauty of Blackness.
Yes.
And for us being 13% of the population, if that number hasn't increased or decreased since I last checked, we have so much to celebrate. We have so much to let people know who we are, what we're about, without being so negative and falling into, you know, unfortunate mishaps that either we have done or have been done upon us.
Yeah.
And so that's, I guess that's the message.
I love that. We are beyond a stereotype. We
Yeah.
are beyond a thought of where we should be or could be. We are here as many within a room. Um, and I love, and we will end on I am.
Yeah.
The list goes on.
That's,
Um, Darryl, I thank you so much for joining.
thanks.
For our listeners and those watching, thank you so much. Please continue to follow us on the Cavu Group. And I look forward to speaking with you again, Darryl.
Of course, Leslie, you know where to reach me.
That I do. Bye now.